My parents never even tried to call me by my real name. To them, I was simply the stupid one. That label was pressed onto me before I could even read properly. While I carried that burden, my brother Darren was treated like royalty. He was the genius, the crown jewel of the Vale family, the son who made it to Harvard on a full scholarship. On the day he graduated, my father stood proudly before a crowd of hundreds, boasting about the empire Darren would one day control. He vowed to give him the family's $75 million company, a brand new Tesla, and our $13 million mansion in New York. The applause felt endless. Like a royal ceremony, I sat far in the back, unseen and ashamed, wondering how I would ever step out of the shadow they locked me into. Then everything shifted. A man I had never met walked over to me. He bent down, placed a thick white envelope in my hand, and whispered softly in my ear, "It's time they learn who you really are." In that instant, everything I believed about myself and everything my family believed was on the verge of collapsing. I was raised in a home where affection was earned like awards, and only Darren ever took first place. From the very beginning, my father, Victor Vale, made it clear who truly mattered. Darren was the prodigy, the golden heir, the son meant to carry the Vale legacy forward. I was the other child, the one who never seemed to meet the impossible standards they worshipped. At family dinners, my seat was always the same, at the far end of the table. The long mahogany surface stretched between us. My father at the head, Darren beside him, and my mother Marielle nearby, glowing with pride whenever Darren spoke. By the time I tried to say something, the topic had already changed. I learned quickly that staying quiet hurt less than seeing their eyes fill with boredom. My father could tear me down with just a sentence. I still remember one night when I was 14. Darren announced he'd been accepted into an elite science program. The room exploded with praise. My father raised his glass and declared, "That's what it means to be a Vale: excellence, leadership, intelligence." Then he glanced at me with a slight grin and said, "And you, Aaron, passed gym class. We should appreciate the little wins." Everyone laughed. Even my mother joined in, her laugh softer, like she knew it was cruel but no longer questioned it. The pain wasn't just in the words. It was in the certainty that they never believed I could become more. My mother would compare us in quiet moments, thinking no one noticed. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" she'd say while handing me a plate or folding laundry. Her voice was calm, almost indifferent, but every comment sank into me like a stone dropped into deep water. Darren flourished in this world. He fit the role of the perfect son effortlessly. Tall, sharp-featured, confident, moving through life like it already belonged to him. He knew he was the favorite and took pleasure in rubbing it in. When I was 16, I picked up a part-time job at a nearby diner to pay for my own needs. One evening, as I headed out for my shift, Darren lounged on the living room couch, soaking in our parents' admiration, and shot me a grin. "Make sure you wash the grease off before touching the door," he said. "We wouldn't want the neighbors thinking the Vale family employs servants." My parents laughed like it was clever. I walked out without reacting, acting like it didn't sting. But remarks like that slowly wore me down, piece by piece. The only person who ever saw me differently was my grandfather, Eldon Vale. He was the one who had started the family business decades earlier, turning nothing into the empire my father now controlled. Eldon was calm and kind, a man who valued people over profit. Whenever I visited him, he never asked about grades or awards. He asked what I was thinking, what I hoped for, what truly made me feel alive. One afternoon on his porch, he leaned toward me and said, "Aaron, never confuse their blindness with reality. You carry something Darren never will. When the time is right, you'll understand. Don't let them take that from you." Those words stayed with me, even though I didn't fully grasp them then. To me, I was still the overlooked son, surviving in the shadows of a family that measured value in applause and headlines. Life inside that house felt like a contest I was never meant to win. My father trained Darren like a future commander. He brought him into boardrooms before he was even an adult, let him observe major deals, and proudly told every visitor that Darren was the future of the Vale legacy. I was never included. Instead, I was sent to cut the grass, run errands, or stay out of the way. It felt like my presence was a nuisance, something to control, not celebrate. As the years passed, the distance between us only grew. Darren's acceptance into Harvard was treated like a historic event in our home. That very night, my mother hosted a lavish party with catered food and champagne. People I didn't know congratulated me, assuming I must be proud. I smiled politely, but inside I felt erased, like my identity didn't exist beyond being Darren's brother. By 19, I understood I couldn't depend on my parents for love or approval. I took on multiple part-time jobs, saving quietly, building independence they never noticed. While Darren came home from summers abroad with stories of Europe, I spent mine lifting boxes in warehouses and scrubbing dishes. My parents brushed off my work as pointless, never realizing it was shaping a strength they never saw coming. Even so, the burden of their judgment pressed down on me every time the family came together. My father's voice replayed in my mind, "Aaron, you'll never become anything." My mother's disapproving looks followed me through the hallways. Darren's laughter was a constant reminder of how easily life seemed to favor him over me. As his graduation drew closer, I had already steeled myself for the humiliation I knew was waiting. It was never about whether they would choose him again, but how publicly and painfully they would do it. I prepared to remain silent, to bury my pride while they praised Darren as the shining jewel of the Vale family. What I didn't know was that the life they had pushed me into, the one filled with quiet shame and darkness, was about to collide with a truth powerful enough to shake the entire family. I had no idea that the envelope waiting for me that day would confirm my grandfather's words, or that my silence was nearing its end. Darren's graduation day felt like a staged production from the moment I opened my eyes. My parents treated it as more important than any holiday or milestone we had ever marked. My mother, Marielle, rushed from room to room, barking instructions to the staff about flowers, catering schedules, and the guest list. My father, Victor, stood in the foyer adjusting his cufflinks, already practicing the speech he would deliver to the hundreds of invited guests. I had no purpose that day except to stay out of the way. I wore one of Darren's old suits, altered just enough to fit, and my seat at the ceremony was placed in the farthest rows. From a distance, I watched Darren walk across the stage, his robe flowing as his name echoed through the hall to thunderous applause. My parents rose to their feet, my father glowing with pride. I clapped as well, though my hands felt heavy and my stomach tightened. Once the ceremony ended, the real show began. Our family hosted an extravagant reception in a New York ballroom, glowing under crystal chandeliers and polished wooden floors reflecting warm golden light. Valets lined the entrance as luxury cars arrived one after another. Executives, politicians, and longtime family allies stepped inside dressed in tuxedos and gowns. They weren't there just to celebrate Darren's graduation. They had come to witness the formal unveiling of his inheritance. I did my best to fade into the background. I stood near the rear wall, partly concealed behind tall vases filled with white lilies. My presence felt like an obligation, nothing more. People passed by without a second glance. A few whispered, "That must be the other son," as if I were nothing but a footnote in the story they had truly come to witness. Then came the moment I had been dreading. My father stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, his voice echoing across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight to celebrate my exceptional son, Darren Vale." The crowd exploded into applause. Darren, standing near the front, smiled with the confidence that had been nurtured his entire life. Victor went on, his words growing more dramatic with each sentence. "As many of you know, the Vale family has built more than a business. We have built a legacy. And tonight I am proud to announce that Darren will not only carry our name forward, but will inherit everything we have created." He listed it all, the company valued at $75 million, the brand new Tesla Model X waiting outside, and the $13 million New York mansion, now all Darren's. "He is the future of our family," my father declared, and I could not be more proud. The room erupted again. Glasses clinked, cheers rang out, celebration closed in around me. I remained seated at the back, my chest sinking deeper with every shout of praise. My mother leaned into my father, smiling in quiet triumph, her hand resting on his arm like a silent message. "We succeeded. Our perfect son has it all." For a brief second, Darren's eyes met mine. He raised his champagne glass in my direction, but not as an invitation. His smile was sharp, taunting, as if he were celebrating my defeat. The message was unmistakable. He had won. I had lost. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the walls of that room where I felt less than human, reduced to a shadow. The humiliation weighed heavier than ever. I thought about the years I worked without recognition, the nights I spent alone convincing myself that one day they might finally see me differently. But with my father's words, that hope was crushed in front of everyone. As the applause for Darren continued, my mother walked past me toward the stage. She paused just long enough to whisper, her voice cold and cutting, "At least don't ruin this day for your brother. Stay out of the way." Then she was gone, smiling again as she reached for Darren's hand. The speeches rolled on. The toasts grew louder and I stayed frozen in my seat. My fists tightened beneath the table as I fought to keep myself composed. Anger and grief collided in my chest, a storm I had no place to release. My thoughts drifted to my grandfather, Eldon, the only person who had ever spoken to me like I mattered. His words echoed once more in my mind. One day the truth will set you free. But what truth? All I could see was this reality. My parents had made their choice, my brother wore the crown, and I was the forgotten son left in the shadows while everyone else basked in golden light. The struggle that had defined my entire life had never felt more obvious. I wasn't just excluded. I had been erased. My father had declared it to the world, and the applause that followed felt like nails sealing a coffin shut. In that moment, I believed I would remain silent forever, that I would survive this night the same way. I survived every insult, every whisper, every cruel laugh. What I didn't know was that this very evening was about to deliver something I never saw coming. As the applause finally faded and the music resumed, I noticed a man in a dark suit moving toward me through the crowd. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He held something in his hand and his eyes were locked on me alone. He moved with intent, cutting through laughter and celebration as if none of it existed. His stare never wavered, and I felt the atmosphere shift before he even reached my table. He was tall, sharp-featured, unreadable. When he stopped beside me, he leaned down slightly, placed a thick white envelope on the table, and whispered in a low, deliberate voice, "It's time to tell them who you really are." Before I could react, he straightened his jacket, gave a brief nod, and disappeared back into the crowd as quickly as he had arrived. I sat completely still, staring at the envelope resting against the polished wood. My hands trembled as they hovered above it. For years I had been dismissed, ridiculed and silenced, but no one had ever hinted that there was more to me than what my family claimed. I slid the envelope onto my lap, hiding it from view. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break free from my chest. I thought about leaving right then, slipping away before anyone noticed, but the man's words echoed again. Who you really are? What could that possibly mean? The speeches continued on stage. Darren now stood beside my father, smiling wide as guests congratulated them both. Their voices faded into noise as my focus narrowed to the sealed envelope. I slipped a finger under the flap and paused. Part of me feared it was a cruel joke, another way for fate to humiliate me. But another part, the one that still carried my grandfather's faith, pushed me forward. I tore it open. Inside were several official documents neatly bound, along with a folded handwritten letter. Stamps and signatures covered the pages. My eyes scanned the first sheet and my breath caught the instant I saw my name, written there clearly, not as an afterthought, not as a joke, but as legal fact. The ownership shares of the Vale Company, the trust controlling the New York mansion, and accounts I had never even known existed were all registered under my name. Aaron Vale. The final page showed a transfer of authority, signed years earlier by my grandfather Eldon himself. My hands trembled violently. I unfolded the letter and recognized his handwriting immediately. Steady. Familiar. Aaron, if you are reading this, then the moment has arrived. I watched you and Darren grow, and I understood early on that this family's future could never rest on arrogance or ego. I chose you because you understand humility, because you know how to endure without praise, and because you see people for who they are, not for what they offer you. Doubt yourself no longer. Everything I built now belongs to you. I stared at the page until my vision blurred. My grandfather had chosen me, not Darren, not my father, not the flawless image my family worshipped, but me. For years I had allowed their cruelty to define my value. Yet here was proof that the man who created it all had always seen something different in me. My chest tightened with disbelief and quiet rebellion. I wanted to stand up and reveal the truth immediately, but fear anchored me in place. My father stood at the front of the room, commanding attention, his reputation shining brighter than the chandeliers above. Challenging him publicly could trigger consequences I wasn't ready to face. The Vale name was power, and Victor Vale had spent his life guarding it through control and intimidation. Then every memory rushed back. My father's smirk when he called me worthless. My mother's hushed comparisons that stripped me down. Darren's cruel jokes disguised as humor. Years of silence endured in hope of a single moment of approval. I had let them decide who I was for far too long. The envelope in my hands wasn't just paper, it was liberation. I closed the folder and slipped it inside my jacket, pressing it tightly against my chest. The decision became clear. I would not stay silent. Not anymore. I would not allow my father's voice to overpower mine again. As the music softened and another toast was raised in Darren's honor, glasses lifted and cheers filled the room. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady but my resolve firm. For the first time in my life, I felt taller than the judgment weighing me down. As I walked toward the stage, a few heads turned, curiosity spreading. My father noticed me approaching and frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Darren smirked, assuming I was there to praise him, to play my usual role as the quiet shadow. My mother shook her head slightly, her eyes sharp with warning, but my grandfather's words echoed in my mind. One day the truth will set you free. That day had arrived. I climbed the steps to the stage, my heart racing, my fists clenched. Victor leaned toward the microphone, forcing a smile as he tried to stop me. "Aaron, this is not your moment," he muttered under his breath. But I didn't move. I stood firm. My voice shook at first, but with each word it found strength. "Actually, Father, this moment is mine." The room dropped into complete silence. Guests froze mid-toast, glasses hovering in the air. Darren's confident smile cracked. My father's eyes tightened with rage as I reached inside my jacket, gripping the envelope that held the truth my family had spent years burying. The quiet felt heavier than noise. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me as I stood at the edge of the stage. The envelope pressed to my chest. My father stepped closer, his jaw clenched, his voice low and sharp. "Aaron, step down. You're humiliating yourself." For years I would have obeyed. For years I would have disappeared the moment I was told I didn't belong. But not now. My hand trembled as I pulled the papers free and lifted them high, enough for the room to see. "I'm not the one embarrassing myself," I said, my voice carrying farther than I ever imagined. "You are." A wave of gasps swept through the crowd. Darren laughed uneasily, lifting his glass again. "What are you doing?" he said. "Sit down before you make a fool of yourself." I unfolded the documents. The seal of the Vale Company glimmered beneath the ballroom lights. "These are signed transfer agreements from Eldon Vale," I said, my voice steady now. "He chose me, not you, Darren." "And not you, Father. The company, the mansion, the accounts, every part of it was placed in my name years ago." The room buzzed with shocked whispers and stunned silence. Some guests leaned forward, trying to see the pages. Others exchanged uneasy looks, unsure what to believe. Victor lunged toward me, his face flushed with fury. "This is absurd." That old man was confused. He didn't know what he was signing. Before he could snatch the papers from my hands, a firm voice cut cleanly through the chaos. I knew exactly what I was doing. Every head turned as my grandfather, Eldon Vale, slowly rose from his seat near the front. His cane tapped against the polished floor with each step toward the stage. Though age had bent his body, his presence carried more authority than anyone else in the room. When he reached me, he placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I entrusted those documents to a man I believed would deliver them at the right moment, he said. That moment is now. He looked at us all. I chose Aaron because I watched both of my grandsons grow. Darren, you possess intelligence, but intelligence without humility becomes arrogance. Victor, you built wealth but lost compassion along the way. Aaron endured neglect and cruelty, yet he never allowed his heart to harden. He will lead because he understands the worth of people, not just power. The room erupted again, louder this time, filled with gasps and murmurs. Darren's face drained of color as his smirk vanished. Grandfather, you can't be serious, he stammered. I did everything to make you proud. I achieved more than Aaron ever could. Eldon looked at him with quiet sadness, not anger. You achieved for yourself, Darren, not for others. That isn't leadership, that is vanity. Victor turned toward his father, desperation rising in his voice. You would hand everything to the son who failed, my father snapped. To the one who never lived up to the veil name? Eldon's response cut through him like a blade.
I am giving everything to the man who redefines what the veil name stands for.
The room fell into absolute silence. Even the chandeliers seemed to shimmer under the weight of his words. For the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be truly seen, not as a disappointment, but as the rightful heir to something far greater than money. I turned to face the audience, my hands steady now. All my life I was told I was nothing, that I would never be enough. Tonight you heard my father say it again, but what you see here is the truth. I lifted the document slightly. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did. I won't waste what he trusted me with. I will honor this family's legacy in a way that builds people, not just profits. Applause began softly, uncertain at first, then grew stronger. The sound rolled through the room until it shattered, the silence that had crushed me for years. My father's face burned with anger, but no words came. My mother's lips trembled, her polished smile gone. Darren stood frozen, his raised glass forgotten as if time had left him behind. At the back of the room, the stranger who had delivered the envelope appeared once more. He watched quietly, then gave me a single nod before slipping away. Whoever he was, he had been the bridge between my grandfather's promise and this moment of truth. Clarity washed over me. This wasn't about inheritance or wealth. It was about breaking, free from the chains my family had wrapped around me since childhood. The humiliation, the cruelty, the years of silence, every moment had led to this night where I could finally stand and speak without shame. I turned to my grandfather and bowed my head slightly. Thank you for believing in me. He squeezed my shoulder and said, now show them why I was right. When I looked back at the crowd, I no longer saw strangers staring at the family's failure. I saw witnesses to my transformation. I saw the end of the story they had always told about me and the beginning of the one I would write myself. For the first time, Darren dropped his gaze, unable to meet mine. The smirk was gone, replaced by something he had never felt toward me before. Fear. And standing there beneath the bright chandeliers, I finally understood the truth. I was never the dumb one. I had simply been waiting for the right moment to show them who I really was. As the applause softened into uneasy murmurs, the weight of what had just unfolded settled over the ballroom. My father's hands clenched at his sides, his voice low and bitter. This is not the end. You have no idea what you're stepping into. Aaron. He spun on his heel and stormed out, his polished shoes clacking against the floor like gunshots. My mother followed silently, avoiding my gaze, her face pale beneath layers of makeup. Her carefully crafted image of the perfect family had shattered in a single evening. Before everyone she had wanted to impress, Darren remained frozen in place, shoulders rigid, hands trembling around the stem of his glass. He looked at me with disbelief and rage, as though I had stolen something he believed was his by birthright. You don't deserve this, he spat. You're nothing compared to me. I held his gaze without flinching. For the first time, I did not shrink beneath his words. Maybe I'm not what you thought I should be, but I am what grandfather knows I can be. That's more than enough. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. His sense of superiority had crumbled in an instant. My grandfather, leaning on his cane, stood taller than I had seen him in years. His voice, strong and unwavering, cut through the tension. This family will change starting tonight. The company is in good hands, hands that understand the cost of being overlooked. Aaron, the burden is yours, but it is also your gift. Those words sank into me, heavy and freeing at the same time. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Running a multi-million-dollar company was a responsibility I had never imagined. But for the first time, I believed I could rise to the challenge, not to defy my father or humiliate my brother, but to honor the faith my grandfather had placed in me. The applause began again, gradually at first, then stronger, louder, filling the room. Not for Darren or Victor, but for me. It was as though a tide had washed away years of silence. My chest lifted, my shoulders straightened, and I finally stood taller than the shadows of my family. Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the chandeliers dimmed, I stepped outside into the cool New York air. The city lights stretched across the skyline, glowing like a promise. For years I had looked at them as a world that belonged to everyone but me. Now they felt different, like something I had finally earned. I thought of the boy I had been, sitting at the end of the table, dismissed and mocked. I thought of the countless nights I believed their words, believing I was nothing. And I thought of the man I had become, standing free at last, truth in hand. The lesson was clear. Being underestimated does not define your value. And sometimes, the harshest judgments prepare you to lead with a strength no one expects. The labels others place on you do not dictate your future. What matters is the truth you carry within, and the courage to rise when the moment arrives. My grandfather joined me outside, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You see now, don't you?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said. "I see it clearly." He smiled, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Then carry it well. The future is yours." I inhaled deeply, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. Fear, shame, years of being invisible, they no longer had power over me. I was not the dumb one. I was the one chosen, not for perfection, but for resilience, for heart, for strength forged in silence. And to those listening to my story, if you've ever been mocked, underestimated, or cast aside, remember this. Your worth is not determined by the voices that try to bury you. Your moment will come, and when it does, the truth will roar louder than any insult ever could. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me which part resonated most. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel.